So as you know, our speaker today, we're honored to have the Mayor of Medina, Dennis Hanwell, here. He's going to give you a State of the City address. We're looking forward to it. It's always a good one, and glad to see so many people show up. Little biography on him. Dennis Hanwell is the Mayor/Safety Director for the City of Medina. He has been the Chief of Police, had been the Chief of Police of the City of Medina for over 12 years. He has nearly 34 years of service with the City of Medina and over 36 years in law enforcement experience. Dennis has an associate's degree in criminal justice from the University of Akron and a bachelor's degree in criminal justice administration from Tiffin University. Dennis had served as the president of the Medina County Police Chiefs Association for 11 years. He's had articles published in the National Criminal Justice periodicals and is a speaker at previous Ohio Attorney General conferences, safety community conferences, and public safety director conferences. Under his tenure, the City of Medina Police Department has received both state and national recognition for various community policing initiatives. Those initiatives have been implemented citywide under the community-oriented government model. Dennis has been married to Chris for the past 39 years. They have 2 adult children, Jonathan and Nicole, and 1 grandchild, Madison. So please join me in welcoming the Mayor of Medina, Dennis Hanwell.
Thank you, Larry, and thanks to the Chamber for inviting me to speak today. It's always an honor to present the many positive things going on in the city, which is the result of staff and employees of the city versus me. But you'll see as we go through the slides, there are many positive things. I'd like to also take a moment and thank each of you for attending to hear what's going on with the city. We collaborate so much together. The business groups, the city, the schools, and we're going to talk about that during the presentation, but I appreciate you taking the time to attend as well. Before I get started, there are a number of elected officials with us that I'd like to recognize. Trustee Sally Albrecht from Montville Township. Thank you, Sally. Ohio House of Representatives, Steve Hambley. Medina City Councilman Jim Shields, Ward 4. And from our City School Board, Robert Skidmore and Rebecca Parkhurst. Also attending is Katie Simo, representing the Ohio Secretary of State. I'd like the city staff to stand just for a second. I know they're kind of spread. They're at this table, Mike, Jim Shields. This is where it all takes place, is with the leadership team and their staff. Jared as well is at the camera there. Thank you. Special recognition to Sherry in the purple sweater up front here. Sherry came down from Brunswick. Had over 30 years, about 35 years with Brunswick City, always in a part-time capacity, didn't have the opportunity to go full-time, and when my assistant, many of you know, Dawn, when she decided to not work for the city and to spend more time with her young children, Sherry's filled that void for us and has done an excellent job, and we're thankful, Sherry, for you joining us. From my family, my folks are here, Bob and Nancy Hanwell. If you want to just give a wave, probably easier for you. My wife Chris's parents, Steve and Joanne Pesho. My aunt and uncle who come every year from California to see this presentation, Carl and Elaine Cobbs. My son Jonathan and his girlfriend Christy. And last but not least, last year, somebody forgot to introduce his wife. And I've been hearing about that for 12 months. My wife, Christine. I'd also like to mention Miles Reed has put together this PowerPoint presentation. I think you're going to be well pleased with it. He does a great job with these for us. Usually I give him an outline of what my proposed talking points are, and he takes the words and then creates what you see here today. And I know he spent a great deal of time on it. You'll never see another PowerPoint like this. Once I start, you'll get it. So the first impression of the city is always important to us, because we never know when we're going to make that first impression. When is it the person's first time to drive through the city? When is it the business owner's first time to look at the downtown, to look at our square, to look at our parks? So we go above and beyond in trying to create that positive first impression. Last year, our theme was "There's something special about Medina." This year, we've taken that theme, and one of the subcategories of what's special about Medina is a culture of caring. And you'll see that tagline throughout the slides here. What you'll notice here, in case you need a little help in the back, is what Miles created is a PowerPoint with a video running in the background that he took with a drone as we talk about the different points of the city. So not only can you hear what's going on, you can visibly see it. That's not an easy task. I did not do that. Miles did that. So Larry mentioned the community government model, and basically what it is treating people how you would want to be treated. And also using the staff as effectively and as efficiently as we can. So instead of the street department being responsible for defects in the road or signs that need to be replaced, or we've tried to train everybody in all of these. So now if a parks worker sees a defect in the road, if a cemetery worker sees a street sign that got bumped by a car and we're not aware of it and it needs to be re-erected or replaced because it got pushed over, it's all of our responsibilities. The other thing we did is we've taken the staff and trained them on what serious building code violations and fire code violations are. Not that we expect them to be able to enforce it, but again, we're using the city staff more effectively and efficiently because it's that many more eyes and ears in the community to report these things, so that then the proper officials can get those taken care of for us. So, reasons why Medina is such a great place to live. Living in Medina, we've got great schools, great medical facilities, parks, and this year we opened up our brand new renovated pool, which is like a new pool within the existing pool. Working in Medina is positive because we have the lowest income tax, both in the county and one of the lowest in the state. Starting a business in Medina is very positive because we've changed the processes to make them more business friendly, as well as we've changed the regulations. The city council, thankfully, at the request of the administration, changed the regulations for job creation grants so that it was not as high a financial threshold and not having to create 30 jobs, because that's simply impossible for some of the smaller companies. So we lowered the financial threshold and created another category where if they create at least 10 new jobs and a financial impact, then we can give them back some of the income tax dollars that they pay. The vision for the future is perpetual improvements. We're always looking at better ways and more effective and more efficient ways of doing things. But one of the strongest things that we do here, in fact, Columbus calls it the Medina way. When we were talking about the Robbie's house, and there was some concern with members of the community of, do we really want a recovery center in Medina? And we worked through it. We met with the residents. We established a board to provide some community interaction. And when the state of Ohio heard it, they termed that the Medina way, because Medina has a way of collaborating and working together to get things done versus hitting obstacles and giving up and turning around and not going after it. So the City of Medina collaborates with the Chamber, with Main Street, with County Economic Development, with the schools, with the libraries, our medical facilities, and really, in my opinion, I'm a little biased, but that's what makes us strong. It makes us strong because we're not all pushing in our own directions, but we're all pushing together in the same direction. And the City of Medina benefits from that. So a culture of caring, what's that look like? It involves empathy for folks who are having difficulty, compassion for what their concerns are or what we can help them with. Sometimes it's not even a city problem, but they need some help. I'll give you a couple examples here in a minute. Concern for the people, listening, as opposed to just trying to get off the phone with them, giving them a chance to air out what the concerns are. So what makes us different than others? Here are two, it's actually three examples, but Nino took two of the three, so I clustered those together. So the first one is we get a call from a woman who's at a healthcare facility in Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, panicked. She is unable to come home. They left the garage door open. A raccoon got in the garage, tore the trash apart, and now was inside the family van, and her children were afraid to get it out, and her husband's wheelchair bound. So rather than refer them to an animal control group, Nino gets the call, calls over to Lieutenant Burke Bickler at the police department, and we possess, because sometimes we have to deal with dogs that are problematic, we have one of those long poles with a noose on it. The lieutenant responds, the service director responds, and they're able to get the raccoon coaxed out of the van. One of the children were old enough to back the van then out of the garage, and now we've got it contained in the garage. And the lieutenant was able to get the noose around it, get it drug out into the yard and released, versus having to dispatch it. There are not other cities, I will tell you, that do things like that. Nino got a call from an elderly woman who had a wasp nest in a tree in her yard, not a tree lawn tree that we would be responsible for, but in her own yard. And he's explaining to her, well, what you need to do is spray it, with this bee and wasp killer, let it sit for a while until it takes care of those coming in and out. And then you simply need to get up on a ladder and snip that branch, drop it into a garbage can, put a lid on it. Well, of course, she's elderly. That's not going to work, right? She's there by herself. So what Nino does is he goes down with a city truck and borrows her garbage can, city spray, city truck, borrows her garbage can, and takes care of that for her. And then in the same month, this is both in July of this year, in the same month, we have another call from an elderly resident that missed the trash. Didn't get the stuff out. She hears the trash truck going by. Now I've got my trash, but I have to wait a whole nother week. I'm not sure what I should do. So Nino takes a couple bags from City Hall, goes down, puts the things from the trash can into the bags, takes the bags out to the compactor at the city garage, and she doesn't have to worry about that now for a whole nother week trying to store that trash. Those are things that a culture of caring is about. The other thing that we've stressed, and I worked on it when I was the police chief, so many times it's not that we don't perform what the people are asking, but it's that they didn't know what was done. They called in with an issue, they called in with a concern, but nobody bothered to let them know what we actually did with it. I call that knowledge of results. And really it's more of a dialogue than a monologue. Instead of just calling and telling us what the issue is and never getting back to the person, we try to follow up then. Either we took care of it, we can't take care of it because legally or for whatever reason we can't do what you're asking us to do, or if it has to be referred to somebody else, that we made the referral. If in a reasonable period from now it's still not taken care of, if you let us know, then we can follow up with them on your behalf. But that knowledge of results is very important. The next thing is a friendly city hall and city services. I had a fella come down to pull a permit for a wedding last Thursday or Friday. He was from Brunswick. And he said, I've never seen a city hall like this, where you can walk in, you can come into offices. I was back working in my office. I just happened to come out by Sherry's desk there, and he was sitting in a chair there because it was lunchtime, about 12:20. And he says, well, I'll just wait for her to get back. I said, no, I could process the permit. I think I can handle this. And in fact, he had it all filled out and everything. Sherry had the receipt halfway written. It's pretty easy on my part. But he said, I just want to share with you. I come from Brunswick, and you get stopped at the counter. They have to buzz you in if you're going to this office or that office. And he said, it's just so pleasant to come down here and see people smiling, see people friendly. You can go in and out of the various offices with questions. And that's what we're trying to do. We greet people when they come in. We offer them assistance. Do you need help with something? We've put signs up. Mr. Shields recommended we have signage to orient people to some of the more frequently stopped at offices, and those have all helped, and it makes it much more friendly. To continue along that line, we're going to create a more user-friendly website. Right now, people, if they want to apply for a job, have to physically come in, and let's say, for argument's sake, that you live out of state. Well, you have to come in once to file the permit, and for a police officer, you may have to come back at least 3 more times, if not 4, because there's a written test, there's oral evaluation, there's a physical fitness test, and then there's interviews with the police department to qualify. So when we're talking about diversity and casting a wide net to draw in folks, whatever we can do to make it easier for them to apply, to pay online, to get their permits online. It's not that we don't want to see people, but we want to be as convenient and as customer friendly as you all are with your businesses. And sometimes cities' government lags behind in those things. And sometimes your law director says, I like the physical card so I can wave that in front of the judge and say, look what they signed. But I have to balance that, the legal reasoning, versus the customer service reasoning, and the customer service prevailed on that. So we are going to be changing that. The Community Development Department, we did this a number of years ago, where we put in building, planning and zoning, economic development, all first in the door. Again, convenience. We don't want people to have to go in this office, downstairs to another office, across the hall to a different office. We want them to come to one counter and get all of their questions answered. And that's working very well for us. We're issuing same-day permits, next-day permits. We're going to issue online permits as soon as the website catches up with us in 2018. Something we do that I would challenge you to find another city to do is if somebody wants to do an expansion and they have a business in town, a Sandwich, a Drug Mart, a Carlisle's, we'll take our team and go out to their conference room. You can look at the site, you can look at the plans, you can not inconvenience their whole team of having to come downtown to meet with us, and they appreciate that. In fact, they appreciate it so much, I was at a ribbon cutting last Friday, I believe. The weeks are running together, at Echelon at the old Pythian home. And they're doing 2 different construction projects. Right now the apartments are done. There's a 2-story assisted living, and then there's a 1-story mental health facility that's going to be built there. And the president of Echelon, now they've built these same complexes across the state of Ohio. So he's got a pretty good perspective, right? He told me, I've never had a city more friendly, more welcoming, and more easy to deal with than your city. And that's good news to hear. In fact, he was so impressed, he sold his house in Cuyahoga Falls and moved to Fox Meadows because he wanted to be in Medina, where things like this are happening. So when I hear stories like this, and again, I don't take the credit, I give the credit to the staff, but what we're doing is making a difference day in and day out. Another efficiency we did was putting under our parks director the forestry and cemetery and parks. And the benefit of that, as you can imagine, is we've got a whole group of people now. Our cemetery only has one full-time and one part-time person. Our forestry is the same, but maybe we've got 3 burials today, and that 1.5 people are just simply not enough. Maybe we've got something going on in parks and no burials. The ability to take all of those people under one leader and put them where the greatest needs today are, knowing then that tomorrow or the next day, if we have 3 burials, the guys that went over and helped in parks, we will now put extra people in cemetery. Again, if I was a business owner, I would be looking at how can I use my staff more effectively and efficiently, and that's what we're doing as a city with that. We also ask all employees, we talked about this early on, to watch, to take care of the city. If you see debris in the road or branches on a sidewalk, if you see animals struck by a vehicle, street defects, drainage concerns, we're not expecting them to handle it. You know, obviously, if you're the cemetery worker, you can't fix a leaking pipe, or you can't patch the road, but we want you to report it, because the sooner we can get it fixed, the better off the entire city is. And again, it comes back to that first impression and appearance. And it may go without saying, but it would be one thing for me to stand before you here and tell you that, you know, this is what we want our staff to do, this is what we want the department heads to do, if we don't lead by example. Anybody that's been in any leadership training at all, people will not work with and follow somebody that says one thing, but doesn't replicate that themselves. So if I'm telling people to pick up trash, I'm picking up trash. If I tell people when you walk by something that needs replaced and you see it, that's your responsibility, that's my responsibility. So if I'm riding my bike on a weekend, if I'm jogging around the high school complex, if you know, I'm driving to a meeting and I see something, it's all of our responsibilities. And most importantly, the leadership, because again, we have to set that example for everybody. Another example I think that makes us unique is what we did with the railroad. The railroad, the city owns the railroad that goes north and south, which is from Sealy Mattress on the south end of Lake Road to Osborne. And the railroad fees were $17,500 a year, and then they pay a per car fee. And that's negotiated. We have a coalition of all of the companies using it. So the city was charging $17,500, and our city engineer, Patrick, approaches me and says, you know, we got a pretty healthy reserve here. The track's in pretty good shape. I don't foresee any immediate needs that we're going to need this amount of money. So we should have a coalition meeting and talk about reducing the fees from $17,500 to $10,000 a year for 5 years. I would challenge you to find another city that would say, we have enough money, so we're going to cut these fees for you. In fact, I was so confident of that, I was in Bethany Dentler's office at County Economic Development, and the city of Medina was in competition for the $45 million Carlisle expansion with Oklahoma and Indiana. And these were not the folks from Carlisle, these were their people gathering information, their search team. And they said, tell us what's different about Medina. What's special about Medina? And we talked about the Community Development Department with all three, building, planning, zoning, economic development, all together there to make it more convenient. We talked about permits. We talked about bringing inspectors out in the early morning, late night, Saturdays if necessary to keep your project on track. And we said, oh, by the way, we cut the railroad fees from $17,500 to $10,000 a year. Ask Oklahoma and Indiana if they did that. They didn't. And the city secured that grant. And again, that's an example, but we're constantly looking at what can we do, what can we make better, and what can we do to support the businesses. Another big collaboration is, this says police as caregivers. That's a portion of it. It's really a third. Really, it's the safety forces all working together. And I'll give you some examples of that. So it's police, fire, and then our EMS is run out of the hospital. We don't have our fire department doing that like some other cities do. So our police are first on the scene, usually within minutes, a little bit quicker than LST. No disrespect, it's just the police cars are out floating around, and the LST, is the life support team, comes from a stationary location, unless they happen to be on the road. So our police officers were doing such a good job of being there and starting CPR that the hospital agreed to put AEDs in every one of our police cars, and our city hall, and our municipal court. I'd like to introduce Dr. Rick Shoebridge, the new president of Medina Hospital. Thank you, Doctor. So we start CPR and AEDs as first responders. And here's a couple examples. I told you I'd share an example. Sandwich. John works at Sandwich Salads. 56-year-old male goes down, not breathing, no heartbeat. Police, fire, first there, AED, get him shocked. He's sitting up and talking and conscious when LST gets there. And they take him out to the hospital and treat him. Now here's the interesting part of this. The fireman, the fire truck, was not heading to Sandwich. The fire truck was heading to Drug Mart for an alarm. And because of what we've done in the city, on their own, those 4 firemen knew it's better to stop in front of Sandwich and send the firemen in with the AED and let the 3 continue on to Drug Mart. And those minutes and seconds make a difference. When you're there without oxygen to your brain and your heart not beating, and I share that example with you because it shows these are not my ideas, my vision. This is the role that the city plays day in and day out in saving lives. We use the same AED that the life support team does. So what's that mean? What that means is when LST gets there, they take the cord off of our AED, plug it into theirs. The advantage of that is now they can electronically send that lead over to the ER. The ER can see immediately what's going on with that victim's heart. And if it meets certain criteria, and we've done this in Montville Township, we've done it in the city of Medina, they will auto-launch a helicopter from the main campus of the Cleveland Clinic to pick up that patient, most times before they even make it to the ER. So they go from scene, ambulance, landing pad, into the clinic helicopter, right to the emergency room, heart catheterization lab, and we're having heart catheterizations in less than 60 minutes, some less than 50 minutes. The goal is less than 100, I think, Doctor, 100 minutes. We're beating that by half because of the way this program works. And the doctor and I were together a couple weeks ago chatting about it, and he told me that the downtown main campus is so impressed with how timely we're able to treat, assess, and save many of these victims that they're coming down here to talk and see. Now some of these, it's very clear what happened because our officers all wear body cams. So when an officer pulls up, the next example I have is a person in August of this year. Person's using a saw in their garage. I think Bob, the Gazette had an article on it not too long ago. Nearly severs his hand, totally off with the saw. The officers get there, the first concern is bleeding, because with a massive wound like that, they'll bleed out pretty quickly. So the officers carry tourniquets and are able to control that bleeding so that doesn't happen. But the next thing they did was take that nearly severed limb and pack it with gauze and cold packs to preserve it so that when they got the subject up to Metro, that hand was still in good enough shape to be reattached, reapplied with the blood vessels, with the nerves, and was functioning at post-surgery. The person has been released from the hospital now, has a great deal of therapy to go through, but again, just another example. And then back to the culture of caring. I had a subject call me maybe a week or so ago, and he said, and I know this person, he says, I just wanted to share something with you. He said, my wife, I get a call from a restaurant. They think my wife's having a stroke. She can't talk. She can't communicate. She can hardly stand. She's weak. If she is talking, she's babbling nonsense. And so he said, I didn't know what to do. I put her in the car, and I drove as quickly as I could to the emergency room. And he said, I got, those of you that are familiar with our emergency room, there's a little drop-off for the patients. But you generally come in from the west and exit to the east, closer to the light at the ER there. Well, he's coming in from the 1871 area, so he comes in the ER driveway and goes the wrong way through that little drop-off point to stop right in front of the doors. And he said the biggest sergeant I've ever seen comes walking out the ER doors, and he is pretty tall, and he said, I'm thinking he's going to yell at me for coming in the wrong way into this drop-off. And his question was, do you need a wheelchair or some help? And helped him get that lady in. That's the type of staff we have. That's the type of caring we have. That's the type of city that we have. And I couldn't be more proud of it. Fire staffing collaborations, you may have seen this in the news. We've been trying for years to Montville Township and the city of Medina. We provided fire service. The city has provided fire services for over 5 decades to Montville and have had a great relationship. And we've tried to establish a district with Medina Township. We were not successful repeatedly. And they were looking at their budget numbers, and they were concerned because they were spending between $650,000 and $700,000 a year. And just through the grace of God, our contract was in the news for providing service to Montville for $230,000 a year. Well, that caused the trustees to then beg the question, could the city provide contractual service for Montville Township? And when they first posed the question, I wasn't sure. I'm sure we could provide it. What I wasn't sure is could we provide it for $230,000. So we had to analyze the calls, analyze the geography of the township, and make a determination. Turns out we could. So we ended up taking over the fire operations just a little over a month ago for Medina Township now too. Now what that does, and this is the ultimate end goal, sometimes you have to go at these things incrementally. What we're going to do now is put together a committee with 4 representatives from each township, four, and four from the city, and talk about, okay, these are our existing fire operations, and they are, for your benefit, we have 4 8-hour people during the day and 3 full-time people. So we have 7 people during the day for any fire calls, as well as backing up LST like the police do. And then in the evenings, we used to have 4, and with the assumption of Medina Township, we increased that to 6 8-hour. And the reason I tell you 8-hour is, so many times people say, well, you know, those are part-time firemen. They're part-time firemen. Well, they're working 8 hours. They're all working 8 hours. What we're doing is not working them over the federal health care mandate threshold so that we don't have to pay benefits on top of that. And as a result of that, we can run a very lean operation, still have people scheduled Monday through Friday for 16 hours, and then in the evenings, when there's less calls, we have people available at home to respond, and on the weekends, when there's less calls, we have people at home. And so what we're going to do now with this panel is first look at the existing operations. You know, would we like to have weekends? It's going to cost a little bit more. 16 hours a day. Would we like to have 24 hours a day? You know, what's the cost of that? So we'll get our arms around that first. And then once we're used to working well together, and it seems like we're a functioning group, then we will tackle a fire district. And the advantage of a fire district from a business perspective is what you're taking is those expenses and spreading them over a much broader area so that everybody that pays for fire pays less for fire for equal or better services. And that's our ultimate goal. And we're going to keep it with just these 3 right now. That's my plan. That's the vision of the council right now, because every time they've tried to add other townships, it gets disjointed and gets off track. So what our hope and prayer is that we can start with the 3, and then once we can show some history and some success, then if this township A, Township B wants to join, then we will surely look at that. We're not trying to keep people out. We're just trying to keep it manageable from the start. Investment in our community. I mentioned the Echelon development, senior housing complexes. We have another one going down at the Acme site. The Acme, by the way, they're still talking about building early next year to be open by Thanksgiving, Jim? Thanksgiving of 2018. So that is still on track. There's a senior housing project that's underway right now, if you've been on High Point Drive. Reimagining is taking a look at the downtown, the Chamber property currently being redeveloped. The city has a capital grant, thanks to Representative Hambley and Senator Obhoff, for $1 million to match with our local dollars to build a parking deck. And we're looking at not building that right to the sidewalk, but leaving room so that the commercial area, because we're at 100% downtown, could expand from Sully's patio all the way down to the federal building, federal chambers on the corner there. And again, reimagining what we could do down there to spur the development, the parking deck is going to be very beneficial for that. And refining is, as I mentioned once before, perpetual improvements, doing all we can to improve operations. Employee training and wellness. When I took over as mayor, our police and fire, and obviously our medics, had CPR and AED training. Now at the police department, we did our dispatchers too, because you never know when somebody may be in your building and need assistance as well. And it just didn't make sense to me that we only do it with the safety forces. The more people who know that can assist somebody. So if your heart stops, you don't care if it's the guy cutting the grass at the park, or the first police officer there, or the service director checking the splash pad. If somebody's there giving you CPR, that's what you're looking for, and that's going to save your life. So as a result of that, everybody in the city, every 2 years, has to be recertified in CPR and AED. And it helps them personally, it helps them professionally, and again, it's a community that cares. We started the Healthy Medina program in a collaboration with Medina Hospital. It's been going very well. Our employees are very engaged in it. From a business perspective, we had a 0% increase in healthcare in 2017. Because what we're doing with the Healthy Medina program is lowering our claims on insurance. And the lower your claims are on insurance, the lower you can keep that trend of increase from happening. And I'm telling you that it's taken us 3-4 years to get it ramped up, but it's working very effectively for us. And we're having preliminary discussions that we may not see an increase in next year either because of our claims history again. That's not official yet because we're still in negotiations. So you might have noticed there's some construction going on, right? We have sometimes, when you talk about things, because we know it, because we deal with it day in and day out, but some people don't understand that we have 100 centerline miles of road that we maintain, that we sweep, that we plow, that we put salt. It's quite a vast amount of work. And then if you double that for curbs, you have twice that, and about 100 miles of water line. So when we have these construction things and issues going on, it's simply because of the vastness of what the city has. And those infrastructures only last so long. In fact, it's a phenomena across the country that so many people have not taken care of their infrastructure along the way, and now the cost to do it is simply unattainable. Whereas we have tried incrementally over and over and over again to keep up with that. We also, which is going to lead into the next slide, we also replaced every single industrial road in the city in the last 6 years. Removed and replaced, and all the infrastructure underneath, every industrial road. And I believe that's what prompts a lot of the industrial expansions that we're seeing today. And I'm going to share some of those with you now. So we talk, sorry, I can't flip pages, turn the clicker and talk at the same time. I can do 2, but not 3. So we talk all the time about we're at 100% occupancy for our square, and we're proud of that. It's good when somebody decides they're going to move to a different place or they're going to close their business after so many years or whatever. It's good that we know there's 5 or 6 people in line wanting to be on that square, and we talk about that a lot. But what we've missed, I think, of late is what all is going on in our industrial area. And I take the blame for that because part of it is when you look at things as they're occurring. We have an expansion at Sandridge. We have an expansion at Drug Mart. We have an expansion at Carlisle's. All of these things are going on, but I never really looked at it aggregately. So we did. We pulled it together. From 2008 to present, we've had $125 million in investments, building and equipment in our industrial area. And the reason I give you 2008, and I started in 2010, is because it takes about 3 years to get many of these projects ramped up. By the time you get the building, by the time you get the machinery inside, by the time you get the staff hired, we give them three years to get to their grant dollars, and then we start reimbursing some of their income tax. So $125 million in project investments, and in that same period of time, over $28 million in projected new payroll. $28 million of new payroll from our industry alone. So that tells me that our support, our working with the industry is working well as our square. Our Bicentennial Celebration is coming up. It's not only the city's bicentennial, it's also Medina County's bicentennial and also the city schools' bicentennial. And we're working collaboratively on having events to celebrate all three of those together. Again, collaboration. You know, why would the school want to have their bicentennial celebration independent of the city, and the city independent of the school and the county independent of the schools and the city, right? Makes much more sense to do it collaboratively. We're getting close. Don't get nervous on me. Finances, we're being challenged. We have seen an increase in our income tax. That's helping. But the general fund budget, or the general fund revenues are down, and we're trying to operate as lean and as effectively and as efficiently as we can, again, with the lowest income tax. And we know if we can continue and be as frugal as possibly we can, that in 5 years and 6 years, we have a number of bonding issues that are going to drop that we're currently paying for, that will then free up another 5 to 6% each. Well, one's 4, another's 5 or 6 each, and each percent is about $100,000. That will free that money back up to then help us out, you know, in some of these areas that are a little bit more deficient. But it's been a challenge for us here of late. But I think, as you've seen, we're doing well with it. We partner with the City of Brunswick to do a CDBG grant by partnering with another entity. This is an incentive from the state of Ohio. Instead of getting $350,000 each for the CDBG, we get $400,000 each. So $100,000 more in the county as a result of that collaboration. And the Finance Department has received certificates of achievement for financial reporting in 2008 through 2015. And just so you know, they don't issue those until 2 years after. So it's not like they didn't get it for 16 and you know, this year. They have to wait 2 years after closing to do that. So while you're pondering any questions that you may have, I'd just like to share this with you. I don't want anybody in this room to ever think that I take this position for granted. Every morning when Chris tells me it's 7 o'clock and it's time to get up, the first thing I do is thank God that I am in this position and have the ability to lead this city. I thank him for the staff. I ask for the wisdom. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I ask for the wisdom to make decisions that would be pleasing and to keep our staff safe. And I commit to doing that for you for as long as I'm here, because we are truly blessed to be in the city of Medina. I need a drink of water, and then if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Any questions? Are you waiting to see the grandbaby? Is that what's going on? The Princess of Medina. Thank you all very much. God bless you.